motion to go into closed session?
So moved.
Second.
Be it resolved, the Montgomery County Board of Supervisors of Montgomery County, Virginia hereby enter into closed meeting for the purpose of discussing the following. Section 2.2-3711, discussion, consideration, or interview of prospective candidates for employment, assignment, appointment, promotion, performance, demotion, salary, disciplinary, or resignation of specific officers, appointees, or employees of any public body. 1, Agency on Aging. 2, Board of Zoning and Appeals. 3, Personnel. Madam Secretary, call roll, please. Huh? Oh, an addendum. We need to do a motion for that, Marty?
Yeah, we got to do that first.
All right. Is there a motion to add this addendum?
Yeah, I make a motion to add the addendum agreement for the purchase and sale of property by and between county and HS Development LLC.
Second.
Now we ready?
Okay. Hey, the first vote is on
Is
the
to add.
addendum.
Just to add.
So, Mr. Shepherd?
Aye.
Ms. Bennett? Aye. Ms. Biggs?
Aye.
Mr. Motts?
Aye.
Mr. Tuck?
Aye.
Chair King?
Aye.
6 ayes.
All right,
Okay,
then.
I have a motion and a second to go into closed meeting. Mr. Tuck?
Aye.
Mr. Motts?
Aye.
Ms. Biggs?
Aye.
Ms. Bennett? Aye. Mr. Shepherd?
Aye.
Chair King?
Aye.
Oh, that was a low aye, Daryl.
Yeah. Tell me about it.
Is there a motion to come out of closed session?
So moved.
Second.
Whereas the Board of Supervisors of Montgomery County has convened a closed meeting on this date pursuant to an affirmative recorded vote and in accordance with the provision of Virginia Freedom of Information Act, and whereas Section 2.2-3711 of the Code of Virginia requires a certification by the Board that such closed meetings was conducted in conformity with Virginia laws. Now therefore, be it resolved that the Board of Supervisors of Montgomery County hereby certify that to the best of each member's knowledge, only public business matters lawfully exempt from open meetings requirements by Virginia law were discussed in closed meetings to which this certification resolution applies, and only such public business matters as were identified in the motion made the closed meetings were heard, discussed, or considered by the board. Madam Secretary, call roll, please.
Mr. Motts?
Aye.
Ms. Biggs?
Aye.
Ms. Bennett? Aye. Mr. Shepherd?
Aye.
Mr. Tuck?
Aye.
Chair King?
Aye.
6 ayes.
I'd be glad to. I did want to mention to everybody before we get started this evening that Supervisor Fidrzikowski is on a field trip tonight. He is a member, he's the county's representative on the Montgomery Regional Solid Waste Authority, and they are visiting a state-of-the-art facility in eastern Tennessee. So instead of joining us tonight, he's out looking at trash. So
Now we do invocation and pledge of allegiance.
if we could stand for a moment of silence, and then I'll lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Let us pledge, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Board members, our first item on the agenda this evening is recognition. Welcome to have Chris McDonald from the Virginia Association of Counties here to present a 2019 VACO Achievement Award for the Family Reads program through the Montgomery Floyd Regional Library. Chris, glad to have you.
Thank you, and I promise I'll try to make this as exciting as the trash field trip. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, and members of the public. It's a pleasure to be with you all tonight. This is my second year in a row coming to Montgomery, so especially happy to be back. My name is Chris McDonald, and I'm the Director of Government Relations for the Virginia Association of Counties, or VACO. It's my distinct honor to be with you this evening to present Montgomery County with the 2019 VACO Achievement Award. For the benefit of those here tonight who may not be familiar with VACO, a quick bit of background. Founded in 1934, VACO was established to serve and support your efforts as county officials in a number of ways. First and foremost is through our advocacy efforts at the state and federal level, where we work to promote the interests and legislative priorities of our member counties. In addition to our advocacy efforts, we also serve counties through our numerous education programs, member services, technical analysis, and communications efforts. 17 years ago, VACO first established our Achievement Awards program to better recognize our counties that have developed and adopted innovative approaches to providing public services, as well as to identify programs that can serve as models for other counties to emulate. This year, we had 3 outstanding judges who reviewed and selected winning program submissions. Ted Hovar, Associate Director of Virginia Institute of Government and a former city manager. Dr. Cheryl Bailey, Senior Vice President of Springstead Incorporated and former Chesterfield County Deputy Administrator. And finally, Larry Land, who you mostly know as the retired VACO Director of Policy Development. In reviewing submissions, programs are judged according to several key criteria. First, does the program offer an innovative solution to a problem, situation, or delivery of services? Second, does the program promote intergovernmental cooperation with local, state, federal, and private entities in addressing a problem or situation? Third, does the program provide a model that other local governments may learn from or implement in their own localities? Fourth, is the program based on a program from another public or private entity but represents an innovative approach or customization by the local government? And fifth, and finally, judges use their expertise and instincts when making their final decisions. Over the years, the VACO Achievement Award program has grown more and more competitive. This year alone, we received 96 entries. Of these 96 submissions, only 26 winners were picked, representing 20 different counties. Montgomery County has been no stranger to Achievement Awards, as this is actually the 4th time that the county has won one. Previously, Montgomery County won in 2005, 2010, and last year in 2018. This year, we are pleased to recognize Montgomery County for its exemplary work with the Montgomery Floyd Regional Library Family Reads, or Reading in English to Achieve Dreams and Success program. The Reads program focuses on English as a second language and family literacy throughout the MFRL regional service area. Its goal is to increase the English language skills of parents to achieve parenting, work, and community goals, and to fully partner in their children's education, while also increasing literacy and language skills in the children. At this point, I wanted to ask if Ms. Manina Hall would like to join to talk a little bit more about the program.
So in 2018, Montgomery Floyd Regional Library was selected as one of 20 public libraries nationwide to receive a $10,000 grant from the American Library Association and the Dollar General Literacy Foundation. With the funding, MFRL, in partnership with the literacy volunteers of the New River Valley and many, many others, implemented the Family Reads, which is Reading and Achievement to Achieve Dreams and Success program, which focuses on ESL and family literacy throughout the MFRL service area. So in addition to grant funding, MFRL and partners spent an additional $6,700 on this program. The program was so successful that we actually received funding for 2019 as well. So we received an additional $10,000 from the American Library Association and the Dollar General Literacy Foundation. So it's a program that we're really, really proud of. So far, we've successfully done the program at Blacksburg twice, Floyd 3 times, Meadowbrook, and at Christiansburg. So we've served all 4 of our service areas, and I think we've done it with increasing success. Thank you.
So, Mr. Chairman, on behalf of the Virginia Association of Counties, we'd like to congratulate Montgomery and the MFRL on an outstanding program and present you all with the 2019 VACO Achievement Award. Yeah. Congratulations and thank you.
Thank you.
And I believe we'll take a real quick shot.
Everybody down front.
first.
Very nice. One more. Thank you.
Thank you all. Really appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Mine. I'm sorry. I'll get it out of everybody's way.
I feel like you and I aren't organized with our stuff tonight for some reason.
Where is your stuff?
It's there, but it's just like, I moved it around. What it is, okay.
Board members, our next item on the agenda this evening is a public hearing. This is a public hearing that was advertised in the New River Valley section of the Roanoke Times on August 23rd and August 30th for a request by JBB Properties LLC, Jewel M. Albert Jr. and Angela M. Albert, Agent Balzer and Associates, to rezone properties identified as tax map 014-A38A, 041-A38E, and a portion of 014-A38, parcel ID numbers 025880, 120-191, and 021509 in the Mount Tabor Magisterial District. I'll stop there. I could go on, but I'll stop.
It is a mouthful. Yeah, there's a lot happening with this application, so it's going to, I'm going to try to just walk you through it. There's currently 2 zonings there, GB and R2, and we are looking to go to 3 different zonings, and part of it's a little bit of a cleanup. So of those 3 parcels, Craig read the information for, again, they already have 2 zonings there. We're going to talk about cleaning up and going to 3 different zonings. So the location of these parcels is just east of the town of Blacksburg on Harding Road, and 2 of the structures already have addresses. One is a residence, and one is more locally known as the Buck Shop, and then the site next to it is a vacant property. When you look at it on the zoning map, you can see here the 3 parcels are outlined in the thicker yellow lines. But this is the residential parcel, so it's L-shaped. Then you have the Buckshot parcel, and then this is a larger 14-acre parcel. Only a portion of it is what we'll be talking about tonight. So if you sort of took the line straight across there, it's just under 2 acres of that parcel that we'll be discussing tonight. This is what it looks like on an aerial. So the request is shown on the information that you have as parcels A, B, and C. So parcel C is the smaller piece where the existing house is. It's currently mostly zoned general business, and the request is for it to be R2, which is one of our residential districts. And that would make the lot size, the setbacks, and everything conforming there, as well as the use in the district. Then next to it, you see parcel B, that's the existing Buck Shop, and you can see that that parcel shape is sort of the reverse L of what it is now. So it would be slightly larger, but it would put the GB on that parcel, solely on that parcel. So we won't have that weird box that we showed you earlier. And then parcel A is the parcel that's part of the 14-acre piece, just under 2 acres of that to community business. And that would with a special use permit to allow mini warehouses. And you can see there the buildings that are shown there, gives you a concept of that site. So we just sort of walked through the proposed uses versus what's on the site. And then this sort of identifies what we looked at as we examined the application. So a portion of every parcel has the GB on there. And that's just a by right GB. There's no conditions on that. So anything that we allow in our most intense business district is allowed in the area that was shown as orange that we were just looking at. At this point, if we did move forward, the bug shop as GB and with the different configuration, all the vehicles would be stored behind and outside of the VDOT right-of-way. Any expansion of that site, so if they ever decided to make a larger building, offer any additional services, things like that, would trigger a site plan, and that would trigger more changes as far as extensive buffering and things like that. But for right now, this would just allow them to sort of reconfigure what they already have at the site. It puts the existing residents from the general business zoning district, which is currently obviously non-conforming, into residential. It will have its own individual driveway, but the auto repair shop entrance and the proposed mini storage will share one defined entrance. And we're going to talk about that a couple of times, because anyone that's familiar with that site now knows that it's just anywhere along Harding Road people can pull in and out of. And we talk about that a lot with projects because that's obviously not a compliant entrance, and it really proposes a safety hazard because you never know where someone's coming and going from. So if you have a defined entrance with good sight distance, that is a safety improvement there. So when we did the review with our co-reviewers, transportation for the proposed use was one of the things that we looked at. That we would get a conforming entrance for the bug shop. We'd have the shared entrance. That street is also proposed to be built to VDOT standards, so it can be taken into the VDOT system. When VDOT looked at the review, they said it could meet the subdivision street acceptance requirement standards without any waivers or exceptions. No warrant for a turn lane. They will have to give a site distance easement, but they didn't see any issue with that. And the small portion of the road may not be accepted for maintenance until the residential portion in the rear is developed, the by right portion, just because it won't have enough trips per day to meet the threshold for VDOT. But the onus for keeping it constructed and in good shape is really on the owner and the developer, because they can only develop the R2 piece if that is a state road. So we certainly have a good mechanism in place for that. Things around the site are served by private well and septic, including the residents and the bug shop. The mini warehouses do not have a requirement for water and sewage. And the future dwellings right now that are proposed to be developed by right for the R2 piece would be in a well and septic area. The warehouses propose no impact to the schools. And when and if that R2 portion is developed, that state road would have to be extended, and we'd be looking at things like a compliant road with a good turnaround for school buses, typically via cul-de-sac, and that meets VDOT standards and also the bus turnaround requirements. Environmental had some comments that were addressed, and so the revised version that you have addressed those comments. There's no floodplain on the site, and of course they'll have to comply with environmental regulations, ENS, and stormwater. We looked at it from an emergency services perspective at all. This is in the Blacksburg Fire and Rescue area. We looked at security measures, and those are covered in our SUP conditions, things like cameras, lighting, and limited access hours. And then something that we have used previously on our mini warehouse sites was contact information posted on the site so that it's readily available and someone could call that number. When you look at the comprehensive plan map, you can see, again, just east of the town of Blacksburg on Harding Road, and all three of the parcels are located in what we call residential transition. And that's an important element that goes into our evaluation, because residential transition speaks to this sort of lower density residential neighborhoods in close proximity to the towns, City of Radford, and our urban expansion and other high density residential areas. And it speaks about that a lot, but it doesn't speak about any non-residential uses. However, when you go to the community business zoning section, in order to be rezoned to that district, one of the places you have to be in is residential transition. So we then went into the intent of that district and looked further, and you can see here, I won't read it all to you, but it does talk about several of the items that we used in our analysis. So small scale commercial, non-intensive, conserve the rural community, right along the secondary road system, adjoining existing non-residential uses is another one of the items that that district speaks to. And most of all, we were looking at respecting neighboring uses and community character, and that's what we tried to address throughout staff's work on the analysis. So for this portion of the site, both become conforming that are now non-conforming in some form or fashion, and we get the entrance improvement there. When we look at the community business element, when we go through the sort of list I just gave you, the site does have limited impacts. It's a very low volume transportation user. We again talked about there's no water and sewer requirement for the site. The proposed use can serve the local community. It's located next to an existing non-residential use and general business zoning district. And the existing portion of the property zone, GB, would allow those more intensive by right uses. And so I sort of, we took a concept and laid it over the zoning, so you can get a sense of probably just under half of the site does have that general business designation already. And then also the buffer. And I guess the history behind that is at the time of that rezoning, which was 1982, that's basically the process that they used. You rezoned a site and then you put a 100-foot perimeter around it also. So this sort of represents that 1982 rezoning was for the Buckshop site. So we spent a lot of time both in work session with the Planning Commission as well as during the Planning Commission's public hearing talking about compatibility of scale and character. The Commission gave some initial feedback at the work session, and you'll remember we now do that for any conditional rezoning request, and we found that to be really beneficial because it puts the applicant with the Commission early on and gets to hear some feedback. And we had quite a few citizens come to that meeting as well to share feedback. So then changes were made. The proffers that were originally submitted that you have are the ones that are basically originally came in, and the proffers deal with all three parcels, but the SUP is specific to the community business parcel. And after that initial work session, the applicant followed up and said, look, we'll do fencing, we'll do lighting, we'll do cameras, and we'll impose these hours of operation on ourselves. So at the Planning Commission meeting, again, there was significant discussion, staff's analysis, which you have a copy of, proposed some conditions that we felt like really addressed the impact of scale and character to the adjacent uses. And the Commission kind of went with those but made some tweaks, and so you have those in your cover letter that came over to you from the Commission. The special use permit was certainly the toughest part of the analysis because just anything that is community business might not be a good fit. You could have a lot more traffic impacts or things like that. So the Commission worked hard to really, I think they would say, get that part right. So after a significant amount of discussion on that, the Commission did vote in favor of both the rezoning and the SUP in two separate votes that evening, with the following recommendation for proffered conditions on the rezoning. That was the master plan that you have a copy of, that the road will indeed be a public road, and then they eliminated some of the higher intensity uses from community business altogether. So they said the site would never be any of these sites. For the special use permit, like I mentioned, we also gave you a copy of these, but there's a total of 9, but a couple have some subsections, so I'll just touch on those. For security, there will be security fencing with gated access, dark sky, friendly compliant security lighting at a height of no more than 15 feet. The cameras will be posted and maintained in good working order. The contact information that we discussed, the building's aesthetic, so of a neutral earth tone color, orange and other bright colors not permitted. Orange was specifically identified in a previous one, so we went with it. Single story, and they really liked the 412 roof pitch because they felt like it had a residential feel to it instead of some of the other types. And then unadorned materials such as common block or an unfinished metal, again, making it look fairly non-residential for the area. They'll remain generally perpendicular. You'll notice those 5 buildings being perpendicular to the road give you some more visibility into the site. And the commission felt like that was important as well. The structures that are identified as future buildings, and those are in the rear of the property, and those are parallel to Harding. Should they ever want to build those will have to come back and get a new SUP or expand this SUP in order to construct those. No building shall be longer than 100 feet. They have to be at least 20 feet apart. Chain link privacy fencing is not permitted, so you guys are probably familiar with that. If you've been in town recently, it's on a couple of different sites. And it's great for temporary construction, like is shown there, but we know that over time the sun breaks down the material and the wind will tear it, and it's kind of a maintenance nightmare. So our type 4 buffer area requirements are for 90% opaque, and so anything that meets those requirements other than that can be approved by the zoning administrator. And then after much discussion, because we all know with the time change, it's dark and light at different times, we settled on hours of operation from 7 to 7. And so the applicant and their agent were here when those conditions were discussed and proposed by the commission, which ultimately is how they got with their recommendation for approval to you all. So if you have any questions for me, I'm glad to answer them. And also before you open the hearing, the applicant's agent, Steve Simonis with Balzer, is here.
Does anybody have any questions for her?
I have some questions.
Okay.
So the 1982 rezoning, basically the intent was just to make sure that the bug shop itself was within some general business zoning.
There was a requirement in the ordinance at the time when they did a rezoning. If it was different than the district that was around it, they sort of built this 100 feet around. And I don't know if that was for future expansion. I don't know if that was to cut down on potential conflicts, but that was a code requirement at the time that we don't have now.
And so there's no way of knowing whether, you know, it was done like that so that another business use could go right next to it. It seems to me that the intention was just to preserve a certain, I'd say, radius around the present business, but you wouldn't know, I suppose.
Do not know.
Okay.
We did have some discussion about whether that was for, like I said, to reduce potential conflicts or so that it didn't come back before the board again. If they wanted to do an expansion, it kind of gave them room to grow too.
Mm-hmm. So it allows for growth, but not as much growth as what they're looking for. You said something about just under half of the space that they want to use for all of these storage units is already within the general business zoning.
That's sort of my estimate. Steve might have a real number for you there, but you can see there it's a portion of what's shown. Yes.
Mm-hmm. The perpendicular orientation, mm-hmm. So easy you can see through it, mm-hmm. but isn't there going to be some kind of fencing or boundary, barrier so that you can't see through?
So that will not be along the right of way. That will be along the side and rear.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
So in the map that we have, page 39, which shows all the residences behind and the proposed road behind.
Oh, yes.
I zoomed in, and it looks like the width of the road for this area is a tad narrower than the road for the residents, but perhaps I'm not looking at it exactly correct. because they have some kind of like little islands of going in and out of the storage units and in and out of the bug shop.
Oh, okay. Sorry, I thought you meant the part that Steve's going to cover for future development. So you're saying that there's a portion of this that's more narrow.
So if you look like
Yes.
right before the cul-de-sac, the width of that road looks, decent. But if you look, halfway between where the storage units are, that road, it looks more narrow because they have little islands on both sides.
Right.
I don't know what its width is there. Is it supposed to be consistent all the way through?
So the actual pavement area is probably about the same. It does visually look a little different. There's a fixed 50-foot right-of-way, and this is a concept plans. So as I mentioned, they have proffered that the road will be a public road that meets VDOT standards. So if there is any fluctuation, that would get worked out at the site plan stage. But this was worked on with VDOT because it pushes those entrance to the bug shop further back, as well as entrance to the other, to allow sort of a wide entrance and defined entrance there.
And then on that diagram, the fifth storage unit, the more narrow one, in previous drawings, it was the full length, but now it's shorter. Is that the 100 feet that brought it shorter? I'm not sure.
Yes, that building was originally shown as being a future building, and in discussions, because it was already perpendicular, it was changed to be included with the current review, but it's still narrow. I think the length, I'm not sure, the length was changed because we do have that no building will be over 100 feet, and you do have to have at least 20 feet between each building. So Steve may speak to why that building looks a little bit different. But yes, it was shortened because we had a maximum of 100 feet in length.
So I drive by this property multiple times a week, and where those storage units are drops pretty significantly. I mean, are the plans to grade it up or to just go with the
I imagine there will have to be some site work done because you would want a flat pad. So,
and also on this, so the bug shop presently parks a lot of cars in front of that house.
Right.
And all over, and like you mentioned, there's no defined entrance and exit. Is this in any way going to make the bug shop do what their drawing shows?
Yes, so the resident will be residential only. Once the entrance is constructed, the entrance to and from will only be from there. Typically, VDOT has some sort of curbing or something put in place so that you can no longer sort of enter and exit at the front when they do this type of entrance. So yes, that is one of the items that, as we've done the analysis, we looked at, would sort of clean that up, make sure you had appropriate site distance, and everyone using that one entrance.
Are they required to have some kind of fencing between the house and the bug shop? Or, because right now that small narrow driveway beside the left side of the bug shop kind of opens right up into that house's front where a lot of cars are parked.
Yes. So they will have to sort of keep the residential on residential and GB on GB. There's no current proposal to do any sort of fencing or anything. It is in same ownership right now. But like I mentioned earlier, any change at the bug shop would trigger a site plan, which is where we would look at things like buffering or that type 4 buffer, a structural screen, things like that.
Just give me a moment, please. During the Planning Commission, there were comments from the residents surrounding this location about the safety of, potential drug dealers in the, cooking meth in a storage unit or what have you, and how storage units attract unseemly people at some time. Is there, I know obviously you said the lighting and the fact that it's perpendicular, that helps, but was there anything that is supposed to help the surrounding neighbors feel more comfortable about the safety for their kids?
I think, as I mentioned during the work session, we had quite a few neighbors come and speak. At that time, I believe they thought that the entire 14 acres was going to be developed for the mini storage. And I think once the applicant spoke with them, they got the information in the mail as part of the rezoning. They were able to look at the full package online. I think that eased a lot of the concerns because, again, I think they thought it was going to be 14 acres of mini storage, whereas now it's less than 2, and it always was, but because it's the work session and it's really early in the process, I think they came with a lot of anxiety based on what we heard. So not to say that there isn't still some. We did have a speaker come and speak at the public hearing. But I think that was the initial concern, is that there was an entire site. And as you know, that site goes up and would be right next to a lot of existing homes.
Mm-hmm.
But I think security-wise, again, the gate, the cameras, the lighting, there were several elements that were included to really address security at the site.
That's all I have. Thank you.
Anyone else?
I just have one, it may be for the applicant, or it may be in the materials, I just didn't see it. I see the size of the storage buildings themselves, but not of the units and the number of units that will be there. And in my mind, that will directly affect the traffic count. The smaller the units, you're going to have people coming more frequently or more people there. Is there any proffers that I'm just missing that goes to exactly how many units or the size of the units?
We did not, they did not offer any, and we did not ask or set any limitation on that.
So I didn't miss it.
You did miss it.
Okay.
Unless I missed it too.
Okay.
That's it.
Thank you.
I will pull up Steve's slides for a moment. Okay.
Good evening. Steve Sinonis with Balzer and Associates. We spent a lot of time, several hours with staff early on this process, and as Emily was saying, the little red box down here was strange to us. We honestly thought it was a GIS mistake on the map, and when we pulled it up, we said that GC couldn't go across the road. But sure enough, that 82 case did, and you know, our understanding from talking to Mr. Albert, who was involved with the buck shop at the time, the gentleman across the street was a Mr. Maxwell. He had to agree to the rezoning and sign off on that because part of that GC went across Harding Road onto his property. So our understanding was it was, yes, just to get that 100-foot buffer around the use of it. But as we talked through staff or talked with staff and talked through the issues on it, and we saw the opportunity not just to go through with a CB district for the mini warehouse, but the ability to clean up, as Emily put it, some of the zoning issues out there between the residential, the existing bug shop, and really from a safety standpoint, really help that frontage along Harding Road. That was a big topic of discussion with Paul Brown and VDOT on how we could do that, make it safe. As Emily brought up, it's one big curb cut there, so people are constantly pulling off, parking their cars right there, right on the edge of the road. And talking with Mr. Albert, you know, just over the years, as people, you know, the bug shop's always been popular. It's always a good place to go. They're great mechanics, but it is a little dangerous around there as you're coming up and down that stretch of road. So as we talked to him, we needed to be sure that we gave him an ability to still utilize his property, still be able to function the way he does, but make it a safer access if we were going to go through this process. So with what we have now, again, as Emily described, this would be a full VDOT access, approved through VDOT, VDOT standard, road design, right-of-way, pavement widths, and Supervisor Bowman, it is the same width. It does look a little funny. You scared me. I had to pull my scale out while you were talking and measure it to be sure, but it is 24 feet in pavement all the way down that section of it there. There are two access points, one across from one another there, so that would be the only access into the bug shop right here, I guess closest to Harding Road, you would have another access in the back. And as Emily said, any future expansion they do down here would kick into the requirements for the buffer yards, the plantings, the structural screens, anything else we'd have to do around this proposed residential zoning. We did, after our public, after the work session, we did hear obviously some of the concerns the neighbors had about security. We had not proposed any security features at that point, so yes, the fencing, the gates, whether those are key fob or electronic or passcode gates, they're still looking at the options on that. The security cameras are what we really think are going to be the biggest way to keep tabs on what's going on inside the project there. And again, one of the developers of this project here tonight, and the guys are out of town on another project, they apologize for not being here, is the son-in-law of the Buckshot folks. So he said it's good that, our father-in-law is right across the street. He's keeping an eye on things too. That's not the end-all be-all, but between these guys being here locally, the one gentleman, Jason Boyle, is one of our clients, lives down Harding Road. So there are always going to be eyes on the property, and we think with the security cameras that'll really help it as well. We had, as Emily said, we had a very robust and good conversation with the Planning Commission. So there was a lot of back and forth on the hours of operation, the architectural style, what sort of materials we'd be putting in. And we felt we really came to a good agreement and understanding at the end of the Planning Commission. We're accepting and in favor of all the conditions that were presented by staff and the Planning Commission with those recommendations a couple weeks ago. That's pretty much all I've got. I will show you, this is one example of a layout. As Emily stated in our initial work session, we believe there may have been some concern that the entire 14 acres would be mini storage. This is one layout of a road that could come through that would be a fully designed and constructed VDOT road that would service, single family or duplex, whatever the by right R2 zoning would allow. You see our stormwater management facility down here that's already been rough sized for future development, as well as this site. So we've taken a lot of steps to go through to be sure what we're showing in this first phase would still work if there was any by right development on the backside of the property. And I'm happy to answer any questions the supervisors may have.
I was just curious about the units. Have you talked about the size of your units?
We've talked about it. The VDOT standards that we use to generate traffic, our trip generation, the ITE manual doesn't go into that level of detail. It's based on an overall square footage of mini storage. So I'm assuming they take an average of the sites that they look at. But we don't have a specific number of units, or 5x10s or 5x12s or anything.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
Could you speak to the fact that it slopes down?
Yes, there would be grading involved. We would be filling in that low spot. That's kind of what kicked off this entire process. We had looked at doing a mass grading plan on this area to allow for this project in the future. As we got in with staff, one of the ordinances that the Board of Supervisors passed, I guess, a year and a half, 2 years ago, 2.5. As far as filling and non-agricultural. So basically we couldn't do a mass grading plan on this property because of the existing zoning. So when we saw that, we were like, okay, we've got to go through a site plan process to get to where we wanted to be. That site plan process brought us to you all tonight with the rezoning and the special use permit. So yes, the intent is the grade would be brought up there. Drainage-wise, everything falls down through this low point, kind of runs along Fleet's Way, then makes it quarter of a mile, half a mile down, then ties into another tributary, which ties into the North Fork of the Roanoke River. But we would be filling in this area right here where the mini storage would be.
To be almost flat, or?
No, everything will slope from our new road down to this corner right here and be picked up with either a drainage structure or a drainage ditch to get down to our pond. Again, anybody that's used mini storage or been a part of it, you do have to have it pretty flat, obviously, in between those buildings, so you're not shooting water into the garage doors on the other side. But we do typically try to step those about a foot as we go, drive aisle to drive aisle. It's not really stepping between the buildings, it's drive aisle to drive aisle.
Can you go back to the more close-up view of the whole thing? So, obviously, I'm not a civil engineer, But if this goes in, does the bug shop have to put, only have that one entrance?
Yes.
Okay. And do they have to do the parking lot in the back?
So everything that's shown as gravel right now is what they've got right now. They do not have to do this. If they want to expand, it's got to come back through a site plan.
Okay.
Not back to you all, but through staff as a site plan.
But at a minimum, it's got to be blocked off in front.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Now, whether we do that with curb or whether we pull all that stuff up and sod it and seed it, we're going to have some drainage improvements done in there, some ditch lines along the side of the road, because again, everything right now just kind of sheets into the bug shop. So yeah, you will not be able to pull straight off of Harding Road into the bug shop anymore.
And then lastly, is there a particular timing for this whole thing if this passes?
If it passes, we still have to go through the site plan process with the county. So we'd still be, if it passed tonight, we're still probably 4 months away before anything can start on site.
Great, thank you.
I was going to ask a couple of questions relative to timing, and you already answered those. Thank you. And just, this actually is in my district, and it's somewhat unusual to have a request like this in my district. So it's been interesting to talk to neighbors surrounding it. I have fortunately heard a lot of positive feedback about the need for storage type facilities both in that area and in the town of Blacksburg in general. And so I was happy to see this proposal, and also happy for the entrance cleanup that would be a significant improvement along Harding Avenue. So I think as long as we're looking at something that, once approved, if they're looking to begin immediately, I think that this is actually a very good plan for the site, and especially with the potential for additional housing in the future. So thanks for bringing it forward and for all the detail that you presented to us.
Thank you. Any more questions? Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. Chair, this is a public hearing this evening, but we don't have anyone signed up to speak. However, if you're in the audience and wish to speak on this particular topic, you can come forward, state your name and address, and you have 5 minutes.
Seeing none, we'll close that portion.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Board members, next item on the agenda this evening is public address. Again, we don't have anyone that has signed up for public address this evening as well, but if there's someone here who would like to speak to the board on any topic, feel free to step forward, state your name and address, and you have 5 minutes.
Seeing none, we'll close public address. Addendum.
No addendum this evening, sir.
No addendum.
I was going to ask, since there was no opposition in regards to the rezoning request, do we want to go ahead, and it's been our policy that if no one speaks out against it. I didn't hear any speakers.
Are we prepared?
We don't have anything on the agenda. There was one speaker, I think.
We did the resolution.
Yeah.
Okay.
Was the answer that we don't have a resolution for tonight?
That's correct.
Okay. So it would be on the September 23rd agenda for a vote.
Consent agenda. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Madam Secretary, call roll, please.
Ms. Biggs? Aye. Ms. Bone?
Aye.
Mr. Shepherd?
Aye.
Mr. Tuck?
Aye.
Mr. Motts?
Aye.
Chair King?
Aye.
6 ayes.
Is there a motion to go into work session?
So moved.
Second.
Madam Secretary, call roll, please.
Ms. Bone?
Aye.
Mr. Shepherd?
Aye.
Mr. Tuck?
Aye.
Mr. Motts?
Aye.
Ms. Biggs? Aye. Chair King?
Aye.
6 ayes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Board members, first item we have under work session this evening is a discussion of the fiscal year 2019 year-end financial report. And I believe Angie and Mark are going to be our presenters on this one. At least they both stood up, so I'm assuming that's right.
Okay, good evening. I'm going to talk a little bit about our fiscal year 2019 revenue collection. And actually, Angie and I are going to tag team this, so I'll talk about our revenue piece, and then I'll turn it over to Angie, and she can talk about our cash balance. Okay, as we've talked about in the past, county revenue falls into two categories, undesignated revenue and designated. The difference has to do with whether the funds are restricted or not. The undesignated revenue is unrestricted, which means that you can use that money for just about any purpose, whereas the designated revenue is restricted. It's earmarked for a specific purpose and can only be used for that purpose. So what I've done here is I've broken this chart down into two separate pieces. The top chart actually shows our total collections for both categories without any adjustments. And then the bottom chart actually shows some adjustments, one for the windfall, which I'll explain in a second, and for revenues that are tied specifically to expenses. So if there was no expense, there's no revenue. It's really a timing issue as to why we didn't meet those revenues. To remind you about the windfall is additional revenue that's collected on the second real estate payment due to us maintaining an 89-cent tax rate after the reassessment. So what I've done here is I've taken our undesignated revenue totals, I've adjusted for that windfall payment due to maintaining the tax rate, and then I've adjusted for those revenues that are specifically tied to expenses, which kind of would muddy the water, so to speak, on what our actual collection was relative to what we should have brought in. So once we do that, our total collections were within about 1.58% of the total. I want to talk about the undesignated revenue. Again, that's the largest category of revenue, and it's the one that the board has the most control over. So it makes sense to spend a little more time on that particular area. Undesignated revenue collections were over the estimates by $4.6 million. And those are tied to, again, $2.9 million of that was a windfall from unbudgeted revenue due to the reassessment. We had $500,000 in prepaid taxes. Those are taxes that are not due until December of 2019. So citizens paid those early. They were not required to, but we picked them up in the current year because we operate on a cash basis. $0.3 million was due to an interest rate change on our banking contract. That happened off-cycle mid-year in February of 2019. So those revenues came in after nearly a year after we set the budget for that estimate. So the two areas that you really want to focus on for comparison purposes are the last two, which we were about $200,000 over in sales tax, and then $700,000 in all other categories of revenue that the county brings in. Our designated general fund revenues were $1.7 million less than estimated, and again, that's due to projects that were not completed within the county's fiscal year. Again, that goes back to our timing issues. The revenues are tied to expenses, so it's not that we won't make those revenues, it's just when we will receive the money relative to when they are due. So once we adjust for all those, actual revenue collections were within 1% of the estimate. So this next slide shows the detail behind that. So again, you see our total excess undesignated revenue of $4.6 million. After we adjust for the windfall monies of $2.8 and the prepaid taxes that were not due until December of this year, 2019, and the extra interest due to the banking services, we were within $900,000 or 82/100ths. Revenue picture going forward. County is beginning the process of projecting revenues going into fiscal year 21. These estimates will be evaluated and refined through our December collections. We'll have preliminary revenue projections in January of 20, and final revenue projections will be presented with the proposed budget in March of 2020. At this point, I'm going to hand it over to Angie. If you have any questions on this part, I would be glad to answer them.
Can you just make sure I understand the windfall? I know it's because we kept the 89 cents, but in our budget, we did not assume that it would be kept at 89 cents. Is
That's
that
correct.
it? Okay.
Because at the time that we put the budget together, we hadn't even done the reassessment. And so, yeah, we would have no way of knowing that you would maintain the tax rate at 89 cents. And so those revenues were picked up on that second payment once you guys make that decision.
Okay, thank you. That's all I had.
Any more questions?
Not a question. I just want to take an opportunity to share that I'm extremely impressed with how continuously you are able to so closely to perfectly predict the revenues. I think it's extremely impressive.
Well, part of this, there's a lot of things that we don't control. The economy is a big player in this. Just like I was saying about the prepaid taxes, there's a certain amount of stuff that's going to happen that we just have no way to control for. So what I try and do is show you, okay, if we take those things out of the equation, things that we can't plan for, we don't know are going to happen, how well did we do relative to the original estimates? And I think this kind of shows you that, we try and park it as close as we can.
Yeah, I think the team does a really, really exceptional job. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any more questions? Thank you, sir.
I believe Angie's now going to walk us through our cash position at year end and some thoughts about that.
Mark does the budget part, I do the actual part. I like the actual part because those things he talked about, the part we don't know about, I'm not comfortable with that. I like the part we know. So this slide shows how much revenue we collected that Mark already spoke about, $128 million for the year. And these numbers are on a cash basis, as he said, and they have not yet been audited, but we feel comfortable that they are really pretty close. We've done enough work to know that they are pretty close. There might be a few slight adjustments, but not significant. And then the expenditures that we had for the entire year that came out of those revenues totaled $121.6 million. You can see the breakdown of how much went to the general fund, debt service, the schools, and so forth. And that gave us an increase in cash of $6.4 million. The reason for that, as Mark talked about the revenue that we collected in excess of what we budgeted, and also I think that we generally don't spend all that we budget, which is a good thing because people are not spending for things that they don't really have to have. So this is a familiar sheet. Where is the cash? It starts off with our cash balance as of June 30th. That's the county's general cash. And then it's important to talk about these things because, as you know, we're getting ready to talk about bond issuances as well and go through the bond rating process. And it's very important to the bond rating agencies that we show strong financial position. So we always include on this slide some attributes of our good financial health that are important to remember. It's important that we maintain sufficient cash flow throughout the year, that we can meet our expenditures as they come due, because as you know, we collect our revenue basically twice a year with the tax payments. We also have to maintain reserves in case of emergencies. The bond rating agencies look at that as well. And we would never want to balance the budget with one-time money. That is a very negative approach to take in our budgeting process. So we would not ever recommend doing that. The second box of $22 million, that's an estimate of how much we need for cash flow. And our methodology for that, if you look at the next page, we do a historical look, and the past 2 years have looked very similar. In September of we go back 24 months, and in September of 17, in this project analysis, and last year in September of 16, we had low points of cash of about $24 million. I'm gonna try to go back, but I don't know if I can do that. There we go. We set our
cash flow reserve amount at 22 million, not 24. As our budget grows, and it did grow this year, we will likely need to increase that. We have maintained the same methodology that we've had in the past and done a historical look, but we probably need to keep in mind that that number will need to go up as our budget grows. The next box shows the amount of funds that we have already budgeted and appropriated this year from our cash balance, which is $12.4 million. That include the big items that are included there are county purchase orders, school carry forward, and funds for the Creed Park. The next box of $4.8 million shows our designated reserves, which I spoke about earlier, another financial policy that we have to maintain our strength, and that those dollars are set aside. They are not appropriated, but they're set aside in case we need those for any of the purposes listed. Some of them are required to be set aside, and some are staff recommended. That leaves us with a balance of $7.3 million of cash, and we have not yet received county carry forward requests from county departments. We have already brought before you the school requests and approved those, but the county requests are due back to us in our office in mid-October, and so we'll bring them to you after we analyze those. But an estimate of that is $1.3 million. And then the court services magistrate building project has been discussed, and an estimate for that is about $2 million, which leaves a balance of $4 million. Other possible uses are the Auburn Park that's been discussed. And also, we don't know exactly what our debt service is going to look like for the year that we're in right now. So it might go up a little bit more than we had budgeted based on the market and the timing of the debt service payments and the structuring of the debt. So we don't think that that will be a huge number, but we do think that we might need to use some of the funds for that. And then the unallocated balances as of the end of October, we just show you that every year to show you that those amounts do go up and down at this point in the year based on how much has been appropriated out of fund balance and what our ending cash balances were. Do y'all have any questions?
Questions?
As always, great job.
Thanks.
Really. The information is so easily followed, so thank you.
Thanks.
Yeah, good job. Thank you.
Thank you.
I have a couple questions. If we go back to this chart,
Okay.
page 7. You mentioned just towards the end there that maybe we don't know exactly what our debt service expense will be. Is that because of the new debt that we will be coming?
That's
Okay.
exactly right.
Okay. And then you also, and maybe I misheard, the bottom right-hand box as of August 31st, you said October.
Oh, I misspoke. August. I meant
Okay.
August,
Okay.
yes. So we're comparing apples to apples.
Mhm. Okay. And then, so what we have already committed to the school capital projects, where does it show up on here? When Carol does all her great math and says, we're taking this a little bit here and that, and it all adds up to this, and then if we do the bond thing, then we can do it all. Where does that show up here? Nowhere?
No, because the sources of revenue that we are intending to post against the $35 million for schools would be $5 million in cash, and those payments haven't been made. 2 of those haven't been made. One is this payment for the sale of the former Blacksburg High School. One is a payment for the sale of former old Blacksburg Middle School. And the other payment is not in the general fund, it's in the debt service fund, which was savings from the current year. So you're not seeing those anywhere on this chart.
And so the $4 million that's left over, that's called balance, that's just extra money that we haven't designated at this point in time.
You have not, unless, and the reason we put possible uses down there is your discussion around your next project being the Auburn Park.
Thank you. I think I might have, not for you, Ms. Carroll. I think I might just have one more question. Bear with me. And I don't. Thank you.
Okay.
Great job.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Any more questions?
Board members, we do this every
you
year
very
in
much.
August, just to give you the opportunity to see where we stand. As Angie's mentioned, we do have funds available for county carry forwards and also funds for the court service magistrate project. I'm going to briefly mention that under my county administrator comments tonight, and we can start thinking about other uses in the meetings ahead. Thank you, Angie and Mark and Carol. The other item we have this evening under work session are the legislative priorities for 2020. Hard to believe. We're starting to talk about those, but in a few months, the General Assembly will be convening. What we've included in your packet this evening are the legislative priorities that the board adopted for 2019. The list was quite lengthy. Tonight, the whole purpose of having these in your packet are to see if there are any that you know of tonight that you want to add to the legislative priorities that may not be on this list. Also, if there are any priorities on this list that you would like to remove. But this is the board's opportunity to discuss your thoughts on priorities.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, sir.
One, we have been discussing it when we were meeting as PSA about having the county administrator potentially being over the PSA, and that would allow us to amend the Virginia wastewater sewer connections, and they're not numbered, but it's after the split voting precincts.
Fourth bullet on the second page, yes, sir.
Since it seemed to be the consensus of the Public Service Authority, which is when we're sitting as that, it doesn't seem that's necessary. And when we go down there, we have so many. I think that when you have 2 pages of legislative priorities, they get lost. And if we could try to keep it to 1 page and eliminate some, and this is one obviously that would be easily eliminated. As I say that, I would hope that we would make one of our legislative priorities being that nonprofit entities who are engaging in commercial activity would have to pay real estate taxes when they're engaging in those leases. And I think that needs to be a priority, because right now we're looking at a project that is going to be taking $500,000 a year out of the coffers. And so I would like to see that be a priority, and us approach our legislators now while they could draft the bill saying that those entities, such as the foundation, would pay their taxes, or their lessees would pay the taxes at full rate.
I agree with that.
I did too.
You want to comment on it?
Not yet, no.
I agree with what you're saying, I really do. But we're in talks with the foundation, and what concerns me is if we put this on our agenda to take to Richmond, would that not give them concern and say, well, no use in talking to you now, so let's just wait and see what Richmond does?
Well, when I spoke with Mr. Dooley, and I had a meeting with him prior to that, he indicated that he wasn't opposed to it. If you remember when he got up here, he indicated that why would somebody pay taxes unless they have to? Well, and he would repeatedly said, and his folks that were working for him said, the tax code allows us to do that. And this would be changing that. Now, if they agree to pay 100% taxes, then we don't need, and we can go to our legislators and say, hey, listen, we don't need it. But at this point in time, I think we need to make it a priority because as a foundation, we're getting ready to see them take in University Mall. And then there's discussion that Tech is going to start doing housing for their professors. And that means they're not going to be paying taxes on the houses, but yet we're going to be providing educational services for their children. So if that goes through, that was one of the discussions they talked about. And I am concerned about how the growth is going to affect our area. But obviously, this is our legislative priorities, not one of ours.
Is there a way to answer both of those concerns? Because I hear them both and I think they're both very valid. But is there a way to answer that by saying something other than 100% taxation on commercial spaces? And I'm kind of looking to Craig and maybe even Marty, is there a way to ask for some flexibility for a strengthening of the county's position with regards to nonprofit commercial activity? Is there a way to ask it that doesn't, I hear what Todd's saying because I'm afraid if we say we want this, then the foundation will say, okay, we're going to hold off on having any talks with you until we find out whether or not the General Assembly moves forward with something like this.
My concern is if we move it to General Assembly and they hold off on us, General Assembly says, we're not getting into that, we already got laws, why would they come back to the table and talk to us?
Yeah, and to Chris, or to Supervisor Tuck's point, the validity of talking about it right now is big because there's a lot of property in Blacksburg that is either going to revert to the foundation very soon, or I'm thinking, I know Smith's Landing, for example, is built on foundation land, and so that's a huge apartment community in Blacksburg that I think it was built with a 30-year term, and so they're not even approaching that, but that's going to be a big deal down the road too. So I definitely think you're making an extremely valid point, but I also think that Chair King is making a very valid point as well, and I'd hate to shoot ourselves in the foot on any type of progress with these conversations with the foundation. But I think it's also important to send the message to our legislators that this is an issue that is going to become even more of an issue as the years go on. So play with that, massage that language.
I agree with Todd too. I mean, I understand that point of view. One thing that hasn't been mentioned is how many other localities in this state would benefit from that legislation. Right. You know, we're not the only ones if we do it that way. But at least start down that road and have that discussion.
Well, I've got two questions. The first one is, like, where are the discussions that we're having right now? What's the next step in, you know, having open discussions with Virginia Tech, Foundation, Virginia Tech, whatever, which way we're going to go? I mean, this is something that could even be discussed within the discussions. And the other thing, I sort of agree with Daryl, this is something that is a statewide issue because there are lots of localities that have universities, and we haven't even gotten the data on what anyone is doing, if anything, anywhere else. So I guess my main question is, when are we going to have all this together as far as a timeline goes, because bills have to be put in, you know, by December at the latest. So where is all this going?
And it's not just putting in the bills in December, it's building support starts in September, October, November, then the bill's in. And you know, what you talked about, and Daryl talked about, right now, it's my understanding Radford University is buying up apartment complexes in the city of Radford. That means those are coming off the tax rolls. That is very concerning for their tax base. And if one university starts doing it, there you go. And think about the tax revenue that's generated off the apartment complexes in Blacksburg.
To answer Supervisor Biggs' question, the town manager in Blacksburg and I met with the chairman of the VT Foundation and with the senior vice president of administration at Virginia Tech 2 weeks ago, and that was basically an introduction meeting to just talk about the concepts, talk about the concerns from the locality side, talk about the issues that the foundation and the university have. We're going to reconvene, I believe it's middle of September, for another meeting. This isn't something that's going to be resolved in a meeting or two. I mean, they have some big concerns. We've had a follow-up meeting. The two attorneys and the town manager and I have talked about some parameters. I mean, it is very clear that the law, they're absolutely following the law as it's written. So the discussions we've had revolve around, are there other things that the university or the foundation may be willing to do that would be more in the form of an agreement and not in the form of legislation? And that's where I think the path that we were discussing with the first meeting may continue into the second. That being said, I do think they also recognize that, you know, they'll tell you they're following what the code says, and as they should. I don't know how they'll respond if it's determined that, you know, they feel there's efforts to lobby to change the law. We didn't talk about that in the meeting, and I don't know. I can't answer how they'll respond to that.
When do we have to adopt legislative priorities?
We adopt them October.
Would this be something we could follow up on after your next meeting? Because our next meeting will be after the middle of September.
You know, it almost sounds like at the state level, somebody needs to have a study on this and how it affects localities. I don't know if that would be JLARC or who it would be, but it sounds like this really needs to be a problem that is addressed across the state. I really feel that way. And I think that there's a catalyst here right now to get a good discussion going.
We did ask for information to Supervisor Biggs' point about what our other communities doing. We actually did an outreach through the Virginia Institute of Local Government to get some information. We received a few things back. We got something from Charlottesville. I'm still working to try to get some information from Harrisonburg. But the short answer is there's very little revenue. I mean, this is an issue with a lot of the localities.
And it also sounds like an issue that needs to go to VACO.
Well, and talk about dueling priorities. I think about it from the perspective of a member of the General Assembly, where you're tasked with promoting access to education. And so it's kind of, it's a dueling priority because you want to enable our public colleges and universities to be as successful as possible, and part of that is financially successful. But at the same time, it's causing a balance of power shift where now we've enabled them to the point that we're really hurting communities. And so I imagine that that's a very difficult thing for our delegates and senators on a state level to wrestle with.
And you know, the figure, I was trying to look back for the email, but we're talking about $24 million that we do subsidize Virginia Tech because they don't pay real estate taxes. And that includes not just the foundation, and I don't hold me to that number, but it seems like that number was about right.
Annually.
Annually, yeah, every single year. And I understand the educational component and that shouldn't be taxed because we do that for other nonprofits. It's just the restaurants, the retail space that is competing against our citizens who are paying full freight.
It's more than 10% of our annual budget. It would make a huge difference if we collected it, or any portion of it.
Well, this would have to be, have we got somebody lined up to carry it? I mean, I'm not asking for names,
when this issue came up, I reached out to one of our legislators and he understood that and did not think that it was appropriate for a commercial space to be tax-free, and what was being proposed. And he seemed to be willing to go forward with that. It would be wonderful if it was bipartisan, because that makes it better across the state. But I just, that's where my concern is, of getting this as a priority, because I agree. Well, let's talk with them. Let's see what they're willing to do, but also working on two-prong and going forward with the legislative priorities. And hey, if they're willing to step up to the plate and talk about paying a large portion on commercial and restaurant, that's great, and that's fantastic. And that's similar to what Carillion does in Roanoke. They pay 100%. The foundation pays 100% at the Hotel Roanoke. And I just don't understand why we should be treated differently, especially with this one project and then the University Mall. And I wasn't aware of Smith's Landing, so.
Would you be comfortable if we put this off till the next meeting, if you talk to and see if this person would carry it?
I'd be happy to do that.
I'd be more comfortable, because if we put it on here now and the person won't carry it, then we're out and open.
I also would say, I think that they would want to read the bill before they agree to carry it. And so
you're going to write that too?
No, I agree not to practice governmental law, and that's why I'm looking to our attorney.
We're looking at two different scenarios. One, foundation-owned property that they own, and it's not, they haven't leased it to a non-exempt entity. We can't do anything about that. That's protected under the Constitution, and it's owned either directly or indirectly by the Commonwealth, so it's exempt. But what we're talking about, what you're talking about, Chris, is that statute that says you can tax a non-exempt entity that leases from an exempt entity, but we're restricted by that language where we can only really tax realistically about 15%. And so that's the statute that you could change that would affect those properties that are leased to non-exempt entities by exempt entities.
And that's the exact statute I would like to.
And so we're not talking about anything they own that they run for TAC or the university. That's all exempt. You guys have no authority. You can't get any power to do it.
So just to clarify, just to make sure that I'm pretty sure. So if the Virginia Tech Foundation builds a 10-story tall building and they lease the entire ground floor to Applebee's for 5 years, on that Applebee's lease, where Applebee's is in there, they're not paying taxes because the lease is 5 years or less, correct?
No, they're paying
15%.
Okay, so 15% of the taxes that they should have been.
We don't go to the foundation. The assessor goes to Applebee's and sends them a bill based on that statute, at whatever the percentage is. It's not much.
So then the Applebee's lease rate, it would be fair to extrapolate, the Applebee's lease rate could be lower because the tax rate, the tax burden is significantly lower.
The lease could be lower, or foundation makes more.
Or would Applebee's make more money?
More of the foundation may make more, because there's no tax amount going
for the Applebee's.
Right.
And the cost of business is lower.
But the educational space, say above it, would be exempt.
It's exempt.
Correct.
But also, Supervisor Tuck, you brought up about the Hotel Roanoke. Didn't we get clarification that the reason why the Hotel Roanoke isn't paying, or is paying more taxes, is because of the arrangement between the city and the university to actually fund it to begin with?
They did some of the funding in regards to that, but it was a joint partnership, and there was a conference center that was built along with it. And there's also a documentary that was recently run on PBS. Mr. Dooley talks about that, but that specific was, remember, it was donated to Virginia Tech for free by Norfolk and Southern. And so there was cooperation between the entities, but and you're right, they agreed at the outset, we will pay 100% taxes. One of the reasons I was wanting to try to work hard on this is at the outset of this construction for the potential target, the restaurants, let's talk about it now, not try to go retroactive. But at the same time, I'm looking at changing that statute in particular. Nothing else so we can get a reasonable tax rate on when they're engaging in commercial activity, for-profit activity.
Well, and
And
competing.
And competing against everybody else who's building anything in Montgomery County.
And I agree with that, and I would support us pursuing that, regardless of how the meeting goes in September, because I wouldn't think that all of a sudden the foundation or Virginia Tech is going to agree to start paying us more. They have concerns. It's going to take months, if not years, for us to get even a little bit. If Charlottesville or Harrisonburg or Radford are only getting a little bit, what are the chances of us getting a lot more? Very slim. So I would recommend that we are the leader for the Commonwealth in this aspect, because we have, I don't know if I'm going to say this right, the largest land grant university in the Commonwealth. We should be leading this. And I think that we should. Anyway.
So we could ask Marty to maybe draft it and then share that draft with all our legislators to give them all opportunity to speak on the bill potentially, and maybe they might have their staff might have tweaks that they want to make, and then take it up in our October meeting, first October meeting.
We can do that later. I mean, you can bring it up to a vote now if you want to, and we can do that later.
It has to
We
be
can do that
written
later.
specifically to that code.
To that
part.
statute.
To that
We
statute.
can do that later.
All right, after my work session.
No big thing. You move that forward, and then we'll just.
Or if there's consensus, staff will certainly start.
I mean, you want it to be 100%, that if it's...
You can always start at 100%. It's hard to go up, but you can never.
That's for 150.
You can always go back down, but you can never go up.
No, let's not do that.
To Supervisor Tuck's other point, though, about how lengthy the priorities have gotten, in looking through, I mean, we are at 2 pages, and I definitely think that it kind of gets, some of our priorities might get lost. And so I'm wondering if this can be reorganized topically. So we're maybe condensing it. It would be really nice to be able to have 1 page, but there's like education is mentioned several times, state funding reductions, unfunded mandates, things like that. I wonder if we can reorganize topically to try to condense.
I'd like to see it on a card.
We
Instead of a paper that, everything would be right there and you hand it and sort of as catching.
Like a
pass-out card, yeah.
Yeah, like one that you would take to a door.
And would have our Montgomery County, whatever our branding is or whatever we're doing with that on it. But, yeah, I think that, I agree with you, April, that probably these could be reordered in some way. And another one is the Interstate 81 corridor improvements. Since we have that committee now that's doing that, we probably need to keep that in there some way, but it needs to be reworded. Like we're supporting the committee's work and that kind of thing. Somehow reword that.
And you can take out the split precincts because they're getting ready to redistrict.
Right, you can take those out.
And your mandatory water and sewer.
Okay.
Yeah, I think there's several that can be removed or changed. And I do like the idea of it being, I mean, that actually is kind of, if you think about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's not a piece of paper,
here's
it's a
your
card.
sheet. Yeah.
Marty, the one that's amending section 58-133-31 on the 4 residential units shall be given a 45-day notice prior to the hearing. Is that still valid?
It's still there, but we're done.
Until the next 4 years.
Yeah, we have 4 years.
So we could pop that back out for at least another 2 or 3. Yeah, that's the longest one of all of them.
Maybe we could kind of merge the first 2, ending unfunded mandates and eliminating funding reductions.
There's
several that are, like you've got ending future state funding reductions. There's several that could be condensed into one priority that retains the original intent of the separate priorities.
Yeah, it's called the state funding, what they're supposed to fund.
We'll just limit that into, please give us the money that we're supposed to have.
Yeah, like get a grip and move on. But yeah, I think we could do that.
I personally think that our legislators can read 2 pages. So I wouldn't get stuck on the 1 page, even though it's a great goal to have. I think it's important for them to know all of the things that are important to them, to us rather, that they can help us accomplish.
If you put it on a card, you can put it up front and back.
We have a very
Well, if it was 2
talented public
pages, we would hand
information
them the
staff
front and
that
back
can help
anyway.
us.
No pressure, Jim.
We can get creative. Mr. Chair, I guess I would ask, are there any other, I've heard trying to combine several of these. We've heard a couple that could come out. We've heard the addition of the amendment of the language. Is there anything else the board would like to add or delete from the list that you're aware of?
And then, is there consensus to put one in regards to, and moving forward with the taxation?
That's what I heard.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll address.
What we can do is work on a draft to circulate back to the board for review, and then we can have it. We usually do it, I'm looking to Vicki, 1st October meeting, 2nd October meeting? I can't remember. Do you recall?
We can do it by the end, as long as we get it to VACO before their meeting.
Annual meeting. Okay.
Will you have it done by the next meeting so they can look at it?
We can start working it on
and add it on there?
Yes, sir.
Can we share a preliminary listing of our intent? I know, I can't remember who exactly I was talking to, but the timing of this isn't ideal for the legislators if they're trying to write bills or build coalitions and things like that. So the sooner that we can actually get this published, the better. You know, like even if it was today. But I'm hoping that in future years, can we bring that further up into August even, so that we can get it to them in September. The faster that we get it to them, the more opportunity that they have to build coalitions.
I think that's a good idea because at the VACO regional meeting, some of the counties had already met with their legislators and told them what they wanted, which I was like, whoa, but they did.
So I'm not quite sure when that should be, but even if it was July or whenever, so that we were on the front end, because we can have this same conversation in July as we were having in September.
Absolutely.
So
that's the board's desire, absolutely.
Definitely a good point.
Y'all enjoy that meeting in July of next year.
Any more discussion? Is there a motion to go out of work session?
So moved.
So moved.
Second.
Madam Secretary, call roll, please.
Mr. Tuck?
Aye.
Mr. Motts?
Aye.
Ms. Biggs?
Aye.
Ms. Bell? Aye. Mr. Shepherd?
Aye.
Chair King?
Aye.
6 ayes.
Mr. Chair and board members, the only item of new business we have on the agenda this evening is the adoption of an art mural policy. This comes from a discussion we had at a previous board meeting related to a mural that has been proposed to be added on the southwest wall of the Christiansburg Library. Marty, do you want to give a quick overview of this? Or?
Yeah, I guess I can. I consulted some nationally known people on this, like Carol. We mulled it for many hours, and this is what we came up with. We thought the best way to do is trying to make the box smaller of what we're trying to do. is, the way it reads now is the board would consider either town that wants to make to sponsor a mural and where they want to put it. You would consider those requests from the towns. And so if a private entity wanted to do something, this says that they should go to the town and get the town to sponsor it and then talk to us. The submission would go to Craig. Carol made sure it wouldn't go to her. The letter, it would be by a letter or an email of some sort in writing, but it would explain where they want, what county property they want to put it on. Also, they have to certify to us that it complies with any local ordinance, state laws, because what we're looking at more than likely would be within the two towns, like the library. It's actually in the town, and so we don't regulate land use in the town. The towns do, and so anytime they put up these murals, we want to make sure they comply with town zoning ordinances and sign ordinances that we don't have any jurisdiction on. We also need to know who the artist is, what kind of experience they have. We're interested in the depiction when it comes to colors, material, dimension, lifespan, and then more importantly, one thing we haven't really talked about is we really probably should have some type of simple agreement with the town saying that they're going to sponsor it, they're going to maintain it, that we're not using county funds to maintain this, and that if there's a problem, we're going to come in and fix it or take it down at the point that it needs to be taken down or removed. Because I'm trying to keep us out of having that obligation, because I don't think that's the obligation you guys want to have. And then if all that information is submitted, and we said that the mural theme should be consistent with the county building or property in the surrounding area. We like things like nature, landscape, or agriculture. It can't serve as an advertisement sign. We want to make sure adjoining property owners are on board, because they're the ones that'll be looking at it, right? So we want to make sure they're okay. So we want the town to provide documentation that they've at least been contacted and support it. And then once we get all that, the administrator would bring it to you, and the board would decide whether they want to let that particular county property as a mural site. Open to questions or suggestions. This was all what me and Carol came up with.
I'm so glad you included me more.
Yes.
Have any questions, comments?
I have a question about how this applies to the Christiansburg specific library mural that has been proposed. So, assuming or if we approved this policy tonight, then what happens with that request?
The only thing I see outstanding in that request would be the town agreeing through some simple agreement that they would maintain it if need be, or take it down when it was time to take it down. Assuming you guys are okay with where it is.
So then we would kick it back to the town of Christiansburg and say we need something in writing saying that you agree to maintain this project. Then it would come back to us for a final
or you could
vote.
approve it tonight under that condition.
Ooh, that's a nice option. Just because in the interest of everybody's time.
Yeah, and I think they complied at least closely or almost in most of the other, they told us what it looks like. And
So we could approve tonight conditioned upon the town of Christiansburg putting into writing their commitment to maintaining the mural.
if need be, yeah. And now they could delegate that to the library, but the county is the one who's not going to be participating in maintaining it.
So basically, we just want to transfer the responsibility, delegate. And for how long? In perpetuity? Until the mural is removed?
Yeah, and you maintain
Yes.
the power. Basically, the policy says, and we'll put this in the agreement, that we're providing them what's deemed a license, which is a right to use that property, but we can, with, 30 or 60 days, I have 30 days in there, we could, if need be, terminate that if we find it's in the best interest of the county to do so. It could be because maybe we're building on to that building, or no longer is that mural look as good as it used to. I don't know.
Okay.
Have any questions?
I don't want to hold up this vote, but I would like the ability to have murals on county buildings that are in the county also.
Yeah, well, you have that authority because you own that. You control that property.
But do we have
A policy?
policies, guidelines for that?
Well, I could tweak this to give you, to add that as another option.
Only because of what Supervisor King mentioned the last time. He didn't want 100 people coming and asking to put on a mural on the Animal Care and Adoption Center, for example, or on the new, there's going to be some kind of restroom house at the different parks, you know? What's to say that somebody doesn't want to put a mural on that?
They can always ask, but we can always say, no, thank you. Because it is our building. It's just like, we would have to approve that, or the county administrator would have to approve that.
I'd give you guys the pleasure.
That's a governmental function you wouldn't want to undertake.
I guess, would guidelines be helpful to help make sure that there's certain...
I mean, what would happen in the example you just said was they would just come to the board and say, will you sponsor us putting that on your property? So you would sponsor your own, or the town would sponsor them if they're in the town.
We don't need any language around that?
I mean, if you want to do that, I was trying to limit it just to the two towns, but if you want to have the ability, I mean, you have it anyway because you own the property, but if you want to set something in there where if the board wants to sponsor a mural on county property outside the two towns, or any town with the town's approval, then we could put that in there as well if you want.
Or you could just have guidelines for what the board will consider to go on properties that you govern, and let this stand as a policy on its own for the two towns.
I think this is sufficient for the policy on the two towns because we always retain the right to say yes or no for county-owned property that's not in the town limits as well as in the town limits, but this at least creates a pathway with both towns working very publicly on creating art in their communities. This creates a pathway for them to approach us for permission to use our buildings and us to still retain the ability to say yes or no.
Right.
But they're not going to ask to paint the Animal Care and Adoption Center because it's not in the town.
I'm not going to.
You're not going to go out there and
I guess my point is if we get enough murals going on in the towns, some county people may want to make some recommendations, and I don't know if guidelines would be helpful or not, and that's perhaps my question.
Oh, in the future they might be if people are asking for them for some sort of project.
Or you can always paint your building. I mean, you can always, because you would be the sponsor of it.
I don't know. I think once you go down that road, it's going to be so different, each request. If you ever get them anyway, there's no way to regulate, I think you're going down a road you don't need to go until you get there.
Well, you know the old saying, if you're going to start something, you don't have to stop it.
Yeah, but we can already stop it.
Yeah. Just as I said last time, I'm a firm believer if we let one person do it, we got to let everybody do it. I mean, if we come out and we say, all right, this is fine to put this mural on this one, but you got to go through town of Christiansburg. First thing's going to be said, but the county people owns the building. Why do I go through town of Christiansburg?
Now, the town is paying for it, though.
They're just paying to start it.
Right. I don't know.
It's a taxpayer bill. I mean, just my opinion, I don't think we need to start it.
I would recommend that we move forward with this, with the caveat that the town of Christiansburg would pay for the maintenance and at a later time create guidelines if we feel it's necessary. I don't feel compelled at this moment in time to create guidelines, to create work, as Supervisor Shepherd is a little bit referring to, when there's nobody knocking on our door for the county mural opportunity. So
So are you saying that you...
I'm making a motion. How about that? Basically summarizing what...
So is your motion to approve this policy as
Yes.
outlined, or to approve the mural on the Christiansburg Library?
Our policy.
Okay.
With the slight change, yes. Condition on Christiansburg assuming the responsibility for the maintenance.
Well, that would be different than the policy.
Right, yeah, that would be a second vote, yeah.
Yeah, second vote to approve the mural, first vote to approve the policy.
Yeah, correct.
I'll second.
You're seconding the approval of the policy.
Of policy. That's why I understood her motion to be as policy.
Yes.
Okay.
And then we'll have another vote on the mural.
A motion, second, any more discussion?
This is on the policy.
This is on the policy only. Madam Secretary, call roll, please.
Mr. Motts?
Aye.
Ms. Biggs?
Aye.
Ms. Bennett?
Aye.
Mr. Shepherd?
Aye.
Mr. Tuck?
Aye.
Chair King?
No.
5 ayes, 1 no.
So then at this time, Marty, could we make a motion to approve the mural as presented at our last meeting with the condition that the town of Christiansburg approves in writing, or says in writing that they will accept maintenance of the mural in perpetuity?
Yeah, repair, maintain, preserve, or in the alternative, remove, yeah. So, does that sound all right?
So is that a motion?
So yeah, then I would
Second.
make that motion.
Motion second.
Think so.
Okay, ready for vote?
Got a motion and a second, any more discussion? Madam Secretary, call roll, please.
Okay, Ms. Biggs?
Aye.
Ms. Bennett?
Aye.
Mr. Shepherd?
Aye.
Mr. Tuck?
Aye.
Mr. Motts?
Aye.
Chair King?
No.
5 ayes, 1 no.
Calendar reports.
I have a report.
He doesn't even give you a chance to ask.
I know. Wait till I ask. County Administrator.
I do have a couple of things. I do want to mention that on Labor Day weekend, the Renew the New event was held, and for the 4th consecutive year, Montgomery County participated, and we had nearly 140 volunteers that collected 1,880 pounds of trash and miscellaneous debris that included a recliner and tires from a 4-mile stretch of the New River. Certainly appreciate all the efforts of county staff. I believe Brad Buchanan coordinated that on behalf of County Parks and Recreation, so appreciate the efforts there. Had several county staff members out that day. Several of us attended a broadband summit in Richmond that was co-sponsored by VML and VACO last Thursday. Brought back some good information, heard some things that we are already working on. Also heard some new ideas during the course of the day. That event was very well attended. I think there were over 150 people from across the state at that meeting. I'm also have been working with our consultants that we've hired, Blue Ridge Advisory Services, and we'll be reaching out to each of you probably in the next couple of days to find some time for you to have an opportunity to talk to the consultants about your thoughts on broadband accessibility in Montgomery County. And last but not least, just wanted to mention again the joint governmental meeting that is being held on Thursday at 6 o'clock in Roanoke. All the local governments in our region have been invited to hear from President Sands at VT, Nancy Agee at Carillion, and the leadership team at VT CRI. A couple of folks have mentioned carpooling. I'll get an email out tomorrow to everybody, and if you're interested, let me know and we'll set something up. That's all I have.
Thank you, sir. Supervisor Shepherd.
They've already left. I wanted to thank the financial division of this county. They do a great job. So that's all I have.
Thank you. Supervisor Tuck.
Supervisor DeMontz and I had the opportunity to go to the Upward NRV dinner. One of the things that was amazing to me, just in 1 year in the NRV, almost 1,500 jobs have been created. It's pretty amazing. And we are in a growing community, and it's not just Montgomery County, but it's surrounding counties. And so we're seeing, while we tend to be the economic engine of the New River Valley, we're watching other localities and utilizing the educational foundation that we have here in Montgomery County through Virginia Tech. And so it was a really good evening and very well attended.
Thank you, sir. Supervisor Biggs.
Well, I represented us at the VACO regional meeting. There were actually two regions, Region 10 and 11, on Thursday, August 29th in Martinsville. And we heard from Danny Marshall, who is a delegate from the Danville area. He talked a lot about hemp, and so I made it clear to everyone there that Jim Politis, our former board member and chair, was responsible for us having that discussion at that particular time. It was pretty interesting when it came time to go around to the different, counties to see what their concerns were, and they're the same concerns we have. Unfunded mandates, school funding, infrastructure for schools, broadband. So it was pretty much on what we're doing. And then going to the broadband meeting. Of course, Craig's mentioned he was there, Brian Hamilton was there, Supervisor DeMontz and Supervisor Fichikowski and myself. And one of the things I was sort of disappointed in, but I understand, is we sort of didn't get any of that grant money that's floating out from the state. And it was suggested that we really start thinking about, and which we already have, we know broadband is something that's vital to infrastructure in this county. It's got to happen. It's got to happen for kids, it's got to happen for businesses, it's got to happen. So one thing that some of the localities are doing is sort of like what we do with VDOT. We put, $500,000 a year towards our roads. Well, they're starting to do that towards their broadband. And so it might be something that we need to investigate and think about. And the other thing that came to mind is, and I know I asked Craig about this, I really, really want a grant writer for our county, and I know there's a position we put in the budget, and hopefully that will take care of that. But we're losing a lot of money by not having a grant writer. A grant writer can pay their own salary in no time by bringing in grants that we could really use in this county, and I think we're a little bit behind in not having one. There are a lot of smaller counties that I'm aware of that have them, and they've brought in some really good grants. And so that was something that I would like to see us, and hopefully, when you go through the hiring process, we'll get somebody that's able to do that, because it affects so many different aspects of services that we can provide for our citizens. And I know on the school side, it's really brought in a lot for them. So that's just something I've been thinking about and just wanted to throw it out there. So, and that's all.
Thank you, ma'am. Supervisor Bone.
I want to piggyback on the appreciation of our finance department and their reporting and budgeting. I think they do an excellent job. I also want to congratulate the libraries again for their Reads program. I was on the board of the library last year and heard all about it, all the successes, and it was really exciting. So I'm really excited that you got funded a second time, and I'm excited to see that mural too. That's it.
Vice Chair DeMont.
Just a couple of things. I will miss the meeting on September the 12th. Unfortunately, I will be very far out of town, so I will not be able to make it back for that meeting. So I know that you guys will all represent us extremely, extremely well. I look forward to hearing everybody's feedback from that meeting. Also, just to speak to, I guess, the educational opportunity, because I have, and I do hear from time to time a little bit of kickback. Sometimes citizens will say things about the trips to Richmond and stuff like that. I have had the opportunity just in the past couple of months to attend 2 really very well-organized, very educational seminars. I attended a seminar on utility scale solar, which was a topic that we fortunately have not had to deal with in Montgomery County yet. But if we do have a utility scale solar project come, we have rewritten our zoning code to accommodate utility scale solar. And I realized myself that I was not very familiar with what the I guess advantages and disadvantages of that were. And then also I made the comment to several people at the Broadband Summit just this past week that I felt like personally I was lacking in the knowledge and the ability to converse about broadband. And just in this one-day seminar, I learned an incredible amount of information about how broadband is delivered, how we can work as a community to make sure we're delivering broadband to a larger number of customers, the economics of how broadband delivery occurs. And so I think it's really equipped me from this position to be able to make more informed decisions. So these VACO events and other seminars that we attend are extremely valuable to our growth and ability to serve in our positions up here. And then finally, I just wanted to wholeheartedly agree with Supervisor Biggs about how nice it would be to have a grant writer, how much of an advantage that could place Montgomery County at. So I wholeheartedly agree with you and support that idea. And that's all I have. I went fast.
No report. Meeting adjourned.